Is believing something false a subset of believing something true? Interesting. Let's have a look at this. Now, they mention subset, so they're talking about set theory, and that's the lens we're going to examine this with. To start, we need to understand the three doxastic attitudes. We have belief, disbelief, and suspense of judgment. So belief is when you think something is true, a positive attitude towards the proposition in question. So when you believe something and you think it's true, that entails not believing it is false. Suspense of judgment in this context is when you haven't been compelled to believe one way or the other. You're essentially unconvinced. That is what it means. Now, there are different types of suspense of judgment, different uses. But when we're talking about it in the context of doxastic positions, that is what they are. Now, a doxastic position is essentially a belief position, a cognitive state, an epistemic stance. Okay? You can't choose what you believe or disbelieve or even choose to suspend judgment in this way. It's just whatever you are convinced or unconvinced by the arguments, evidence and priors. If we use their logic symbols to denote what they all mean for ease, we've got P for proposition, B for belief, and the negation symbol. And therefore we've got these qualities that we can put in the sets, and we'll call these sets A, B and C. Where these sets overlap is called an intersect, and it's qualities shared by more than one set. The intersection between belief and suspense of judgment is not believing the proposition false. And the intersection between disbelief and suspense of judgment is not believing the proposition true. So could we regard these intersections as supersets? Well, you can, I guess. Let's have a look at how that appears, shall we? First, we have superset X and superset Y. X contains both belief and suspense of judgment, and Y contains both disbelief and suspense of judgment. We're therefore left with ambiguous sets. They basically become logically redundant. There is no point in having them there because the information provided is pretty useless, at least when it comes to doxastic attitudes. So you could regard them as supersets, but it's pretty pointless. And if you're talking about this because you want not believing in gods to be the superset atheism, well, there is a lot more than simply this lack of belief that atheism is, and there is more than an absent psychological state that makes one an atheist. For one, they have to be a person. They have to be able to understand the proposition. They have to have come to a conclusion on the proposition. So, now sure, sometimes there is an application for these broad sets. If you want to, say, discuss all the things that aren't theists, let's have the superset of non-theism, with the understanding that there are lots of distinct types of non-theist in there. You're not trying to make a sweeping generalization about non-theists in general. You're just saying they are absent of the quality that puts them in the set of theism, and therefore you're going to regard all of that as one for this particular context. If you're clear and about your purpose, then sure, sometimes like broad supersets like that, that can be useful. But when it comes down to doxastic attitudes, it doesn't quite work like that. As I said before, it's ambiguous, it leads to logical redundancy. And I tell you what, if you're interested in a bit more detail about this than I've done in this video, I've done an article recently, so check it out on answersinreason.com.
I wanna sex you up. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about ABC. Let's talk about all the unions and the disjoints that may be. Let's talk about intersex. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about intersex. Let's talk about sex.